Good afternoon everyone to this local review body. We have two to discuss today. Do we have any reports of absence? Apologies for absence?
I do. I have apologies from both Councillor Cunningham and Councillor Lundy.
Do we have any declarations of interest? No. First on the list is notice to review reference number. Sorry about this. Sorry, it's o'clock now. Okay. Reference number 2023/03110/10/TP. Demolition of existing dwelling house and garage and erection of new detached dwelling at 30 Ayr Road, Giffnock. I'll pass over to Mr. Brand to go through this. Thank you.
So the first case of this afternoon is it's in Ward 5, Newton Mearns and Eaglesham. There were 6 objections to this application. The reasons for the objections given were the demolition is not required, it would set an unwelcome precedent, it would impact negatively on the character and appearance of the conservation area. The proposal is too large in size, scale and layout. The proximity to the boundary with number 28 Ayr Road causing overshadowing, loss of privacy, disturbance from construction works, health and safety issues, site traffic and the site history. Also mentioned, although not relevant for planning application purposes, were council tax, the reason for the purchase and the number of applications previously on this site. I'll now quickly summarise the case officer's assessment of the proposal. The review board should be aware that there were 2 associated applications for conservation area consent for permission to demolish the building. These applications were both refused. The most recent because the replacement building was contrary to the local development plan. For the actual planning application itself, the footprint of the existing building is approximately 133 metres squared. The proposal would have a footprint of 408 metres squared, significantly larger in size, scale and massing than the existing building, and as a result would take up a significantly larger area of the site, which would constitute overdevelopment of the plot and be out of keeping with the buildings in the locality. The case officer did, however, note that there would be sufficient garden ground. With regards to the proposal being within a conservation area, the location is in a prominent corner location. The case officer considers the building too large and bulky with an unusual roof profile, while lacking the features associated with traditional buildings or contemporary design. The use of some elements of modern materials and finishes are not appropriate to the character of the conservation area. The case officer also identified a negative impact on the amenity of number 28 Ayr Road from the proposed building's height at 6.8 metres high and 17.2 metres width, positioned 3 metres from the side boundary. Such height and massing would result in significant detrimental physical impact upon the amenity of 28. The proposal would not, however, result in overshadowing or loss of daylight or overlooking. The applicant's ecological survey found there was potential for bat roosts. Policy P4 of NPF 4, that's National Planning Framework 4, requires all applications to establish presence of protected species. A bat survey is required, but the case officer did not request a survey at this time. The proposed plan shows 9 trees to be felled near the frontage onto Ayr Road. Of the 9 trees to be felled, 4 are in category B, that is, they're in fair condition, and 5 were in category C, which is a poor condition. It is considered that by virtue of their prominence and contribution to the local character of the area, the affected mature trees on site collectively make a significant positive contribution to the character and amenity of the conservation area. Therefore, the case officer's reasons for refusal are, firstly, the development is not of a size, scale and character that is in keeping with the surrounding residences and would be detrimental to the character and amenity of the surrounding area. Furthermore, the proposal is not appropriate to the character of a conservation area and its setting, and would not preserve or enhance the character of this area. The proposal is therefore contrary to policies 7 and 16 of National Planning Framework 4 and policies D1, D1.2, D2, D16 of the Local Development Plan 2. The second reason for refusal is that the proposal would result in the loss of trees and tree cover, which make a significant positive contribution to the character and amenity of the surrounding area. The proposal is therefore contrary to Policy 6 of National Planning Framework 4 and Policy 7 of the LDP2. And the third reason for refusal given is that the necessary steps have not been taken to establish the presence of bats on site, and it has not been demonstrated that protected species would not be adversely affected by the proposal. The proposal is therefore contrary to Policy 4 of National Planning Framework 4. I will now summarise the statement of appeal by the applicant. Subsidence has caused damage to the fabric of the building. The stone window lintels on both lower front bays are cracked, with concerning cracks in the bottom lintels proceeding up the vertical middle lintel stone on both sides of the house. These cracks go all the way from the base of the window down through the wall all the way to the foundations. Subsidence at the rear of the house has caused kitchen pipes to break, and the main sewer pipes have fractured. Furthermore, concerns over wiring have caused the house to be vacated. To demolish the building but retain the facade and rebuild the rest of the house would cost 1.48 million, 1.048 million, I should correct. Almost every building on other buildings in the area, particularly on Tremaine Avenue, have larger footprints than the current house and their proposed replacement. There are already many extensions in this conservation area which are not sympathetic to the original buildings. They are large and mass almost as much as the donor buildings. There are various types of property within this conservation area. The newest development of flats in the conservation area is constructed of brick, steel and glass. There are Cape Dutch and Marbella style villas, as well as bungalows, large villas, semi-detached and detached houses built from stone, stone and render, stone and timber, brick and render, brick and timber, brick and stucco and brick. The replacement does take into account the design heritage of both the house and the broader diverse feel of the conservation area, while constructing a house which is fit for modern standards of living and contemporary requirements. The new building will be the same distance from Tremaine boundary as is current. The front will be further back from Ayr Road, and the northern edge will be 3 metres from the boundary with number 28 Ayr Road, which is less distance than the current double garage sits from that boundary. The height of the building will be 1 metre higher than that of the current house. The statement goes on to say that the applicant will screen the house from his 2 immediate neighbours in 28 Ayr Road and 2 Tremaine Road, that both his immediate neighbours are happy with these plans, and after discussions with them, welcome the screening. With the screening, the entire house will be hidden from view with only a view from Ayr Road visible. The only windows facing onto 28 Ayr Road are proposed to be from bathroom windows with frosted glass. There will therefore be no issue of overlooking. The two trees which have caused the foundation, suggested to have caused the foundations and subsidence issues, will be removed. The only other trees which will be removed would be trees that are at the end of their natural lifespan, and they will be replaced with deciduous trees as per the environmental report recommendations. I'll just conclude by saying, in the event of this review being upheld, the following conditions should be attached to any planning permission thus granted. Firstly, the development hereby approved must be begun no later than the expiration of 3 years beginning with the date on which permission is granted, or, as the case may be, deemed to be granted. Second condition, before any deconstruction of the roof of the house and garage, a bat presence absence survey should be completed in the period between the months of May and August to confirm whether roosting bats are present. The survey should be submitted to the planning authority. And finally, the third condition, the development shall not commence until samples of the external finishes to be used on the proposed development have been submitted to and approved in writing by the planning authority. Thereafter, the development shall be implemented in accordance with the approved details. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Brand. Can I open this up to the committee for comments, please? Anyone got anything to say? Councillor Ireland.
Thank you, Chair. What it really came down to for me when we were there on site today, because across the road we can see there's lots and lots of different house types across there, but this is in the conservation area and it's in a really prominent corner in the conservation area. It's a nice looking house. What's suggested to go there is an enormous house that's going to be quite far over towards the neighbour. I understand that they're saying about the frosted glass in the windows, so that was good to hear. But to me, it's the fact that it's the conservation area, and we need to protect that. And I had a wee look in what we are supposed to do with conservation areas, and it is just to protect and enhance. And this, to my mind, wouldn't be protecting or enhancing. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ireland. Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite a complicated case, this. I mean, it's basically gone back 21 years, according to the papers here, but the owner previous to the current owner wanted to demolish this structure. So I think it's quite clear that there's been problems at this property over quite a protracted period of time, and that it's not just the applicant who's saying that the repair is economically unviable. It actually says in page 169, so taking this as a full record, that actually lenders do not consider the property suitable for mortgage, it's unfit for mortgage. So I think that does speak to the fact that there is very clearly an issue with the structure which is currently in place. That's one separate thing from the question around what replaces it. Within the conservation area, I have some sympathy with what Councillor Ireland has said. We have like Milverton Court, we have the Hollows, and the applicant has included some photographs of these properties within their appeal. I think we should take cognizance of that, but also ensure that if we do reverse this decision today, is it possible that we can put conditions, suitable planning conditions on the reversal, that I say, for example, the gutters, the windows, the soffits are to be UPVC, which would in any case not be tolerable within a conservation area. So could we put conditions on there to say, well, actually, we're not giving you a green light, we're giving you an amber light, and these variations will have to be made to the building materials before this can proceed. Is that an option that would be on the table, Mr. Brand?
One of the standard conditions would be, in any case, that the materials to be used would have to be shown to the planning authority for their approval. So samples, either physical or pictorial, or sort of like in the design, would require further approval. That condition would be a standard condition in any case.
If I could just respond to that, that does give me a bit more comfort, Mr. Brand, so thank you for that. I think that in conjunction with the reflection that, yeah, the new structure is much larger than what's there, but I don't think it's unreasonably large for the size of plot. It's a corner plot, and it's quite large. And in actual fact, there's only one property with a smaller footprint. Am I reading that correct? There only would be one property with a smaller footprint. So, yeah, what's being proposed is larger than what's there at present. That's unquestionable. But I don't think the replacement would be unreasonable within the context of what's already there in the wider area. Anyway, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Morrison. Councillor Island, first name, Promise Montague.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to check, there was a planning application. I noticed in some of the representations that there was mention of a planning application made in 2022, because Councillor Morrison's right, there's a bit of a history with the house. So that was refused by the planners, but then it was taken to appeal at the reporter, and the appeal was refused. Is that similar to what was refused in 2022? Do you know if that was similar to what we have in front of us now? The reason I'm asking that is I'm wondering if the applicant has decided to come back now with a similar project, but take it through ourselves and try and get planning that way rather than go to the reporter, because the reporter dismissed it. Because I note that you have mentioned that you could retain the facade and rebuild the rest of the house. So anyway, how close is the one in 2022 to this one? It's just mentioned a few times.
I believe that the reason the reporter refused that application, it was actually an application for conservation area consent to demolish the house. There wasn't a proposal to rebuild the house, so the reporter wasn't able to make a decision without a proposal to view a replacement building to view, so declined refused that conservation area consent on those grounds.
Okay. Robst.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm looking at page 15 just now, and the map that's there. Reference was made to flats already in this area, but those flats are in like a kind of corner enclave and part of a quarter roundabout Eastwood Toll. And on all sides of Eastwood Toll there is similar buildings. So leaving that aside, again, that was a decision taken in the past, so I would dispel that aspect of this application. The rest of it, the triangle formed by Rookenglen Road, Davyland Road and Ayr Road, the triangle there is of houses of a certain era, a certain characteristic and visual amenity. The photographs we saw of this application are certainly out of character visually with the rest of that area. and it is a conservation site as well. But in addition to that, even if it wasn't, this proposed building is out of character with the rest of that area, and I strongly oppose this application. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Provost. Councillor Edlin?
I heard the presentation this morning on site, and afterwards we visited the area of the conservation area. There's quite a number of large houses there of different shapes and forms, and I gave it a lot of thought, and although it's a larger house, I tend to think that it would not detract from the area to have such a structure there. I gave this a lot of thought about what should or should not be done and how we can move with the times and progress. And I really think that based on what I've heard or saw at the time, I feel that given the state of the house that is going to be demolished, etc., and has to be a rebuild, I am inclined to think that although it's a larger house, I don't think it will cause any visual damage to the area in question.
Thank you, Councillor Edlin. As we all went out and looked at this, it is a very, very big structure. Of that there is no doubt. And on looking on it, you know, it's in the conservation area. That said, however, there was 21 years ago they applied to demolish this, and the building has just got worse. My concern is it goes for another couple of years and it's condemned, then it has to come down. Because we've seen from pictures in here, we saw from pictures of the house itself, the cracks, some of the lintels, the cracks going down the foundation walls. It is a concern that it is condemned and it's going to have to come down anyway. So on... Pardon?
Sorry, can I just clarify something? Wanted to clarify something. It doesn't follow that because the building is in a state that has to be replaced with this building. If it has to be demolished, then that is one aspect to it, but it's not necessary. It doesn't follow that it has to be replaced by this building.
I'm not suggesting it does. I'm just stating my opinion on it, based on the papers we've got and our visual looking at it. So that's my opinion. So yes, Councillor Morris.
And I think it's a valid point that you make, Chair, that the condemnation could be an outcome here because the property is not occupied. We attended the site visit. There's no kitchen appliances or furnishings within the property, and because the property has been left vacant, there's no heating going on. There's dampness within the property that will hasten the erosion of the structure. I suppose the question is to Mr. Brand. The building materials and the design signature of the properties within this area, is it actually technically feasible to replicate these properties? As such, where would one source the stone and the building materials to, if the building's condemned and it has to come down, what can it actually be replaced with? Do you see what I'm getting to? You know, I don't think it's possible to achieve a full like-for-like replacement because the building techniques and the building materials are just not available anymore.
Brand.
Thank you, Chair. I can only really reply by really just listing the materials which the applicant provided. That the roof would be slate, smooth grey, the external walls a wet dash render white, guillotine stone cladding, the windows and doors would be polyester powder coated composite black, gutters UPVC black, and the fascias again UPVC black. So really, I couldn't really, it would be on my remit to sort of like state what But that would be that's the detail that the case officer made their decision on. Looking at those materials, which.
Thank you, Mr. Blunt. Can I just have Councillor Allen first, then back to you, Councillor Morrison?
It was just a quick point. It was just to come back in. I think there has been a good suggestion made by the planning department in that they're not against works to the house at all. But what they've said is they'd like the front of the house kept so that they still retain, that it still works in that conservation area. And they have said you can do that. You can do an extension. You can do works on the house, but you have to keep the facade. And I think that's a really good suggestion from the planning department. And note that in page 169 they are saying that will be more expensive. But I think that that's a good thing that's been put forward by the planners, because it helps retain the conservation area, and the applicant will be still getting that great house, but without demolishing that lovely facade, because it is a really nice house. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Morrison?
Thank you. I appreciate the response from Mr. Brand as well, and I appreciate you saying that, well, we can only really look at the building materials that have been stipulated in the application. What I'm really trying to get to the nub of is it technically possible to have any alternative materials? For example, you think of the properties in the conservation area in Netherley, which Council Ireland represents. It's my understanding that the sandstone which those properties are constructed of cannot be sourced anywhere. So one could not, even if they wanted to, one could not build a like-for-like replacement of what is currently there. And that's the nub of the matter I'm trying to get to. Are there actually any alternatives, or the building materials that have been suggested here, the closest that you could get in this day and age to what was there before?
Mr. Brand?
Chair, I'm not sure if I'm fully qualified to answer that, but I can steer you back to the case officer's report of handling, where the case officer refers to, I think the wording used was, some of the materials would be out of keeping with the conservation area. There's a suggestion in the case officer's report of handling that they were satisfied with an element of the materials, but if I can just maybe pick that paragraph out, if that's I think that might, it just gives some view on how the application was actually determined. Apologies, Chair, I'm just so many papers.
Chairman?
Mr. Brand, I'll come back to you for me while you look for that. Councillor
Chairman, I noticed that you were midway through your summing up, and then members interceded. I'd like to hear what you finally have to say. Perhaps you could make that now before Mr. Brand continues.
Yep. Mr. Brand, switch your microphone off. I think, as previously mentioned, my concern is that it is condemned eventually, and it does have to be demolished, and it just comes down. Now, there are options to put the facade in, but again, there is no mention of what actually would take work-wise to do that. from the designers or anything. Just there's a cost put towards it, but there's no, if they could keep the actual facade and if that's possible. So my recommendation would be to overturn the planner's decision. That's what I would suggest. If anyone's otherwise minded.
I would be more content hearing what Mr Brand's response is to my question with regards to the building materials.
I think looking on it, I've found about on page 170, if there are any predominant design features associated within the conservation area, it may be brick and render or stone and render. The current proposed replacement takes into account the design heritage of the house proposed for demolition and the broader diverse feel of the house in the conservation area, while bringing the house up to modern standards of living and contemporary requirements, and replaces a house no longer safe for human habitation. I don't know if that's the part you were looking for, Mr Brandon, page 170.
Thank you for that, Chair. I'm actually just looking at page 145 on the report of handling, where the case officer refers to no, that's not it. There is, just bear with me, Chair.
I think I've got it. It's at the bottom of page 145. Last paragraph.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Island. Yes, it is considered that the design materials and scale is not appropriate. Defining the replacement dwelling would not be of acceptable design and layout materials within the conservation area and would not preserve and enhance. So that's actually slightly different to what I was saying, Council. I thought that they previously thought that they thought some of the materials were acceptable, but that no, here's the bill is with an unusual roof profile and incorporates some modern materials and finishes. Furthermore, the building lacks defining features more typically associated with traditional buildings or contemporary design. It is considered the design materials and scale of the proposal is not appropriate to the character of the conservation area. If that helps answer your question.
Thank you, Mr Brand. Mr Councillor Morrison, will you then add?
I have no further questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as I say, my recommendation is we overturn the planner's decision and grant planning permission. If quite happy to hear everybody else. Is anybody second it? Councillor Redland second. Anyone have a further proposal? Provost Montague.
Yes, I would uphold the planner's recommendation to refuse, albeit the building is in a state that doesn't necessarily follow that this proposal for a replacement dwelling is suitable. And referring to page 146, the replacement dwelling would not be of acceptable design, layout and materials within the conservation area and would not preserve or enhance the character of the conservation area. So, on those grounds,
I'd like to second.
Councillor Island,
sorry.
I'd like to second
would
that.
you like to say again? Provost.
Yes, and sorry about that. So, it seems accepted all round that the building is in a state and it might well be demolished. But it is not necessary that this replacement dwelling is the suitable replacement for it, and I would suggest it isn't. So, on the grounds on page 146, first paragraph, the replacement dwelling would not be of acceptable design, layout and materials within the conservation area and would not preserve or enhance the character of the conservation area. So, on those grounds, I move to uphold the planner's decision to oppose not accept this alternative replacement dwelling proposal.
Thank you, Provost. Mr. Burke.
So the motion before the committee today is to, proposed by Councillor McLean, seconded by Councillor Edlin, is to overturn the decision of the appointed officer and to grant planning permission based on the conditions outlined. And the amendment to that motion from Provost Montague, seconded by Councillor Ireland, is to uphold the decision of the appointed officer and to refuse planning permission. If I could have a show of hands in support of the motion, please. I have Councillors Morrison, Edlin and McLean, 3 for the motion, and in support of the amendment, please, Councillor Ireland and Provost Montague. So, by a vote of 3 to 2, the decision of the committee then is to overturn the appointed officer's decision and to grant planning permission based on the conditions outlined.
Can I just confirm, Chair, that the members agree that the conditions outlined by Mr Brand should be part of the decision?
I think we're in agreement with that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Say that again. Oh. No, I kind of lost it now. Was it your chair? Yeah, that was easy. It's right in the front. Yeah, it's a notice to review reference number 2023/0373/TP, change of use from open space to residential garden ground with decking associated with 30 Woodbank Crescent, Clarkson. Can I pass this on to Mr Brand for a quick summary, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, proposal change of use of open space to residential ground with decking. There were 7 objections plus 1 representation in support of the application. The objections were for on the grounds of overlooking, impact on biodiversity, that there is no history of fly tipping on the site, the impact on the amenity for residents of the flat, loss of daylight and overshadowing, impact on property values, loss of access, increase in noise pollution, and other neighbours will propose a similar development. The representation in support of the applicant states that the proposal would not give rise to additional noise. It actually improves the appearance of the site and prevents fly tipping, and screening could be provided to mitigate any overlooking concerns. I now summarise the decision made by the planning case officer. Retrospective planning permission is sought for the change of use of the area of open space identified in the application to private ground and for the erection of decking. A timber deck has been erected on the site. The deck measures 5.5 metres wide by 3.6 metres deep and stands approximately 50 centimetres high. The relevant policies are NPF National Planning Framework 4, Policy 14, Design Quality in Place, which states that development proposals will be designed to improve the quality of an area, and Policies D1 of Local Development Plan 2, which requires that all development should not result in significant loss of character or amenity to the surrounding area, including overlooking issues. Furthermore, Policy D5 of LDP2 states that proposals which would result in the loss of urban green space will be resisted. The case officer's decision is based on the fact that a 1.8 metre high timber fencing results in the encroachment on the gardens of number 38 Woodbank Crescent, and their amenity open space and drying greens with a detrimental impact on their privacy and visual amenity. The manner of this overlooking is exacerbated by the presence of a raised decking. From a raised deck, the closest window in the flats is at a distance of approximately 17.5 metres. From the rear of the flats at Greenwood Court, the deck and fencing is visually dominant and has an overbearing impact on the area which was previously relatively secluded. The case officer gives the following reasons for refusing the application. The development is contrary to Policy 14 of National Planning Framework 4 and Policy D1 of the East Renfrewshire Local Development Plan 2, as it gives rise to significant additional overlooking and has a dominant and overbearing impact, all to the detriment of the amenity of the residents and the adjacent flatted dwellings at Greenwood Court. And the second reason, the proposal is contrary to Policy D5 of the adopted East Renfrewshire Local Development Plan, as it would result in the loss of protected urban green space to the detriment of the character and amenity of the area. I will just now summarise the statement of appeal. The site was bought at auction in 2021 with the main intention of improving the site's visual appearance. Rubbish was removed and the site was landscaped. Access was created from the side lane. The applicant believed that the site would automatically become their garden ground on purchase and that fence and decking could be erected under permitted development rights. The applicant promptly prepared a retrospective planning application that demonstrates that the following policy requirements have been met. Policy D1, the applicant has improved the visual amenity for nearby residents, offering a high quality finish. Policy D1, the applicant has created a boundary feature which creates a distinctive edge and prevents fly tipping and improves security for residents at Greenwood Road. The fence provides screening and privacy. The decking is set back from the fence by 5 metres, and the distance from the fence to the flats is between 15 and 20 metres. Regarding Policy D5, urban green space, the site previously made a negative contribution to urban green space and did not meet the definition of open space given by the 2019 Planning Act Scotland. The proposal does not create a loss of recreational space. The landscaping of the project, the landscaping satisfies the requirement of Policy D5 and does provide the appropriate mitigation required by Policy D5 through biodiversity enhancements and improvements to appearance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Brand. Good owner of the committee for any comments. Anybody get anything? Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Chair. We had a discussion at the site visit earlier this afternoon. I'd like to ask what within planning legislation is the distinction between open space and residential garden? Because to my mind that is the only remaining issue here. The applicant themselves has conceded in their appeal that the decking is unacceptable and should be removed, and I think whatever we approve this afternoon will also reflect that. I'm just a bit confused in terms of what is the distinction open space and residential garden, because if we didn't grant that, can the planning system compel the removal of plants and shrubs from an area of ground to convert it back from residential garden to open space essentially? Can that be done?
I think, Mr. Mann, would you like to add to this? Thank you.
I'll allow Mr. Brand to answer that particular issue, but it's something that was mentioned. It's probably worth me putting some context to it. What the review body have to do today is consider the terms of the original application. Now, the original application is for both the change of use and the erection of the apparatus on the site. Now, although the applicant has stated he will not intend to, leave the decking in situ, that is not something that you could restrict by condition. So fundamentally, the application before you is both elements. And if you believe that either element is inappropriate, then obviously that will colour your decision. It's just to clarify that you can't have one and impose a condition on the other to say that they can't have it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mallon. Mr. Bland?
So, policy D5, open space, is a planning policy which is part of the local development plan. 2, it identifies areas of open space, typically green space, within the urban area, which have an amenity or a recreational function, protect biodiversity or landscape. They don't necessarily have to be publicly owned. Many of them are privately owned, as is the case here. The fact that the piece of ground is still has never been removed from policy D5, it's still to this day a piece of it's still designated as open space within the local development plan. That has implications for the work which has already gone on, in that typically you would have permitted development rights to build decking, in particular decking, in your rear garden. But this is not a rear garden. This is not garden ground. It is still open space under LDP2. So when you're making your decision this afternoon, you have to consider it not as garden ground, but as a piece of ground which is designated as open space. If that's helpful, Councillor.
I think both contributions from Mr. Mahon and Mr. Brand are very helpful in this, and that the two issues cannot be separated. And I think when the applicant themselves has conceded in their appeal that the decking's not acceptable, then I don't see how any member of this review body could consider it to be so. Thank you.
Councillor Ireland?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to say thanks to Mark and Jerry, because both those answers were very, very helpful. Yes, that kind of cleared up a few things I was thinking about. I just wanted to say that when we were there, and this is why site visits are so important, when I was stood on the deck, I actually felt quite embarrassed, because I was looking right into people's homes. I could see people walking about very, very clearly. I'm in complete agreement with the reasons for refusal on this, and why the planners chose to make those decisions. So, but thank you for the answers to those.
Thank you, Councillor Ireland. Provost?
Thanks very much. No, just for clarification, on the aspect of this open ground use, and if I heard correctly, it's recreational as well. That can be used for recreational purposes. And I agree with Councillor Ireland, when we stood at the decking, it seemed as if it was like an observation post that you could see down into people's homes and gardens, and I felt as if I was being a bit intrusive. But I wondered, if that decking was taken away, what use could be made of it, given that the people there have acquired that land? What use can they legitimately make of it? I mean, if it's open ground, normally you'd be able to go and sit in that without it causing a problem to anybody. So I'm just trying to consider all aspects to this. Thank you.
If I could assist, the bottom line is that the applicants have purchased that plot of ground, so technically it's within their wherewithal to fence it off. However, they would be at liberty to make a secondary application, another application, looking for the change of use. and that would then be considered by the planning department as a matter in its own right. And the planning department would then consider it against the relevant policies and determine whether or not it could change to garden ground, which would allow them to do various things on that plot of land.
Yes, of course, Kent Roberts.
So currently, what are they legitimately able to use that land for?
I don't know if we can answer that, can we?
From a legal perspective, it's their land, so they're allowed to exclude other individuals from use. But from a planning perspective, then they need permission to change its use and to thereafter use it in a particular way. I think that's probably the simplest answer. So they can access it, but they can't change it, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Finally, Provost, yeah.
Thank you very much. So is the access part of it? I'm just thinking, if it was mine, you know, if I bought that land, what could the purpose is for using it. But in the meantime, the sun might be shining in that wee bit of land. Is it open to me to go and sit there? Because even if there isn't the wooden structure there, if you're still sitting, you're still observing, you know, the outlook is still the same. So I'm just, again, asking, what are they legitimately allowed to do on that land currently? And I understand what you say about a change of use, but I wondered, currently, what is the situation? What are they able to use that land for? Can they go and sit in the grass, for example, with or without a wooden structure?
Yeah, provided there's no development of the land, then they can sit there in the same way as any other person in the past could have sat there. The issue, obviously, for yourselves as a local review body is to look at this in a planning context, which is about the change of use issue. But yeah.
Thank you, everybody. I think, sorry, Councillor Edlin.
I noticed there was a fence between the garden of the house and then the start, and from the fence there was the land that he subsequently purchased. My question is really, is he allowed to remove the fence so the land from his home title to the additional land is one continuous piece of grass? Is he allowed to do that, or does he have to separate the two with a boundary fence, or not? Because, for example, is he allowed to remove the fence and stick his decking at the top of his house by his back door, where most people have their decking, and sit there, and the decking would therefore not be visible, probably would not be able to see into the other houses because it's not so far down. But is that allowable or not?
I don't actually know that answer. I don't know if legally if there is an answer to that.
The answer is it depends on the original construction of the house and the planning requirements around that construction.
I meant not the house. I'm not talking about the decking.
No, but what I mean, Councillor, is that...
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
When a house is constructed, when any property is constructed or amended or altered, it may be a planning condition that there is some form of boundary structure erected along with it to prevent impact on privacy. So if that's the case, then it would be potentially a breach of planning to remove that boundary structure. So it very much depends on what the original grant of planning was.
So if there's no mention of it, which it probably isn't, the odds are he could remove the fence anyway if he wanted to and just walk straight down between the two. Is that right?
I think so, with the scope of what we get to do.
No, I'm just asking for information. Yeah, I know it's not to do with it, but it's just interesting. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Potentially that's the case, but obviously any structures that were erected within the garden, if they're out with permitted developments in terms of size, scale or location, they would require to go through a planning process as well, irrespective of where within the garden they were, assuming they didn't fall within permitted development.
Well, I'm correct in saying the decking process in a garden in the normal site adjacent to the back door normally is a permitted installation without planning permission, I think, regardless of where it's regardless of whether it looks into somebody's garden or not. Anyway, that's fine. I think if Mark can answer that.
That's right. There are permitted development rights for decking, so long as it's in your rear garden and you are not in a conservation area.
Of course, in this case, it was a stage in the middle of nowhere. Frankly.
And within, and lower than 50 centimetres in height off the ground, the deck.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I would recommend we accept the planner's recommendation of
Happy to
refusal,
second.
if anyone's otherwise minded.
So the decision of the local review body is that the decision of the appointed officer be upheld and planning permission refused.
Okay, thank you everybody. That's the conclusion of this local review body, and thanks everyone for their attendance. Thank you.